Welcome back, everybody. Today we're
Cold
going to be doing a
case.
deep
There are
dive
and
on
how those
cold
investigations
cases.
happen.
Ooh, interesting.
And
Yeah,
then
we're
just
going to be
kind of an
looking
interesting
at
tidbit about
what
how the
defines
term
a cold case
Cold
actually
case.
emerged
There
fairly
are-
recently.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the term itself is kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
Like, what even is a cold case? You know?
Yeah.
Well, it basically refers to a criminal investigation that's gone unsolved, and they're no longer actively pursuing it, often because, investigators just kind of hit a wall and the evidence just doesn't really lead them anywhere.
Oh, so it's kind of like that feeling of like you're working on a puzzle and suddenly you realize you're missing a bunch of pieces.
Exactly. It's like hitting a dead end.
Yeah.
And the Merriam-Webster Dictionary actually uses that same kind of imagery in their definition.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They describe a cold case as being eventually abandoned and filed away among other cold cases.
Wow.
Really paints a picture, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like gathering dust. Case gone cold. Yeah. And speaking of cold case as a term, it's kind of mind-blowing to think that, this phrase that we use so casually is actually a relatively new term.
Yeah, it's pretty surprising when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
Like the first documented use of it was in 1973.
Wow.
Think about all the unsolved crimes that happened before then. What did they call them? It really makes you think about how we understand these concepts, and how language evolves over time.
It's true. It's almost like the act of naming something gives it
Right.
more weight, more recognition. Before 1973, were they just forgotten files?
That's a good question. I guess we'll never know for sure.
Yeah.
But it's definitely an intriguing thought.
It is.
And,
Yeah.
just because a case goes cold,
Well-
it doesn't necessarily mean that it's unsolvable.
Oh.
In fact, the passage of time, while it seems like a disadvantage, it can actually sometimes work in favor of investigator.
Oh, how so?
Well, think about the advancements we've seen in forensic science, for example.
Like DNA analysis. Exactly. DNA analysis has really revolutionized the way we approach these cases. It can link suspects to crime scenes even decades later, or exonerate someone who was wrongly convicted.
Wow.
Evidence that was once insignificant can be re-examined with these new tools, and could potentially crack open a case that seemed hopeless.
That's incredible. So it's like time can actually become an ally in a way, bringing new technology and new possibilities to light.
Exactly. It really gives a whole new meaning to that term cold case, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a closed case anymore.
Right.
And it's not just about technology either. Investigative techniques evolve too. New approaches to interviewing witnesses or analyzing crime scenes and understanding criminal psychology can shed new light on old cases.
So it's like the challenge of a cold case lies in, kind of bridging that gap between the past and the present, using modern tools and techniques to unravel these mysteries that have been frozen in time.
You said it perfectly. It's like trying to piece together a puzzle where some of the pieces have faded, some are missing, and some might even be from a different puzzle altogether.
Wow, yeah.
But every now and then, that one crucial piece emerges, and the picture suddenly becomes clear.
It really makes you appreciate the dedication of those who work on cold cases.
Yeah.
They're not just dealing with evidence and files. They're dealing with the weight of these unsolved mysteries and the hope for justice.
Absolutely. It's a heavy burden to carry. And that human element is something we'll explore further as we delve deeper into this world of cold cases.
All right, well, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back to continue our deep dive.
It's fascinating to see how these cases often really highlight this dance between, time passing and the evolution of investigative techniques. It's like they're always playing catch up.
Yeah, I can imagine the challenges that investigators face when they're dealing with these cases that have gone cold. What are some of the biggest hurdles they encounter?
Well, I think one of the most significant challenges is just the deterioration of evidence. Time can be a cruel adversary, especially when it comes to preserving those crucial pieces of the puzzle.
Right.
Physical evidence degrades, witnesses' memories can fade, and even documents, they can get lost or damaged over time.
So it's like time is constantly working against them, chipping away at the very foundation of the investigation.
Exactly. And then you're also often dealing with limited resources. Law enforcement agencies, they have to prioritize their efforts. And unfortunately, cold cases often get pushed aside in favor of, more pressing active investigations.
Oh, I see.
It's a difficult reality. But I think it's a necessary one, given, the constraints they operate under.
Yeah, it's like this constant balancing act, trying to allocate resources effectively while also recognizing the importance of seeking justice for, past crimes.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the human element. Imagine being a detective. and you get assigned to a cold case. You're stepping into a story that's already been partially written, a tragedy that's unfolded years, maybe even decades ago.
Yeah, that must be a really heavy burden to carry, not only trying to solve the puzzle, but also understanding the impact it's had on the victims and their families.
Absolutely. They have to navigate a complex web of emotions, their own and those of the people who were directly affected by the crime. It requires a really unique blend of empathy, analytical thinking, and just this relentless pursuit of the truth.
And sometimes that truth can be hidden in plain sight, right? Like we were talking about earlier. New technologies can shed light on old evidence in ways that weren't possible before.
That's right. Take facial recognition technology, for instance. It's been really instrumental in solving some cold cases by matching images from, decades-old crime scenes to individuals in current databases.
Wow.
It's like connecting the dots across time.
Right.
Using these modern tools to bridge the gap between the past and the present.
That's incredible. It's like giving those grainy old photographs a voice, allowing them to speak again after years of silence.
And it's not just technology either. Sometimes it's simply a matter of revisiting old evidence with a fresh perspective, asking new questions, and challenging those old assumptions.
So I guess with cold cases, you can't afford to get stuck in old ways of thinking.
Right.
You have to constantly be looking for new angles, new approaches.
Exactly. And sometimes the most crucial piece of the puzzle comes from the most unexpected sources. It could be a witness who finally feels safe enough to come forward after years of silence, or a detail that seemed insignificant at the time, but now holds a whole new meaning in light of new information.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how many of these cold cases are just one small breakthrough away from being solved.
I think that's a thought that keeps a lot of investigators going, that belief that even the coldest case can be cracked open with that right combination of persistence, ingenuity, and maybe even a little bit of luck.
And speaking of persistence, there are specific units dedicated solely to investigating cold cases, right?
Yeah, that's right. A lot of law enforcement agencies have dedicated cold case units. They're staffed with these experienced detectives who specialize in revisiting these unsolved mysteries. They have the time, the resources, and the expertise to delve deep into these cases, often picking up where previous investigations left off.
I imagine working in a cold case unit requires a certain kind of personality, a real deep-seated desire to seek justice, and a willingness to grapple with the complexities of the past.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
These detectives are often driven by this really profound sense of empathy for the victims and their families. They understand that every unsolved case represents a story left unfinished, a wound that hasn't fully healed.
It's like they're carrying the weight of those stories on their shoulders, determined to bring closure and a sense of peace to those who have been waiting for answers, sometimes for decades.
And that sense of closure, that feeling of finally getting answers, it can be incredibly powerful, not just for the families, but for the investigators as well.
It must be incredibly rewarding to finally solve a case that has haunted so many for so long.
It really is. It's a testament to their dedication and a validation of the belief that even in the darkest of cases, justice can eventually prevail.
So while we've talked about the challenges and the advancements that can help solve cold cases, I think it's also important to remember that human impact at the heart of every investigation.
You're absolutely right. We're not just talking about files and evidence here. We're talking about real people whose lives have been forever altered by these crimes. And behind every